Hello folks, today we'll talk about the value of the master's program and dig a little bit deeper into it. Okay, so the content is going to be of this nature. We're going to talk about a different master's program, specifically the MBA program, the MS program, the PhD programs. We're going to look at options within India and also look at, of course, the civil services. Then have a discussion about pros and cons of all these programs and then think about how students would make a good career choice, thinking about the long-term viability of their career with respect to some of these career choices or educational choices that they would be doing. So firstly, the key things to think about is that there is a skill gap difference between what you learn as an undergraduate versus what you would learn in the master's program. So clearly everything about master's program should be tailored towards increasing or gaining more skills and or going towards regions where there's a skill shortage. So you should have these two calculations in mind when you think about whether I should go on for further studies. When I say masters, I of course means larger things like anything for further studies, like further training, further doctoral skills, or anything of that nature. Okay, most people always think that higher education is something that you would do purely from a technical perspective, but you'd be surprised that growth in the industry is beyond a certain level. For example, beyond being a manager, it's all about people and communication skills. In fact, if you look at CEOs, like for example Sundar Pichai or everyone else, you would notice that they had been assigned a mentor who actually trains them to be a better, effective communicator. So there is actually called a communication coach. So all top executives, vice president onwards, actually are assigned with a coach who actually tell them how to deal with people, how to talk effectively, and how to communicate ideas more succinctly towards the audience. So don't always think about growth purely from technology side. It is definitely a stream. You can be someone who is technically an expert and then become like a chief scientist or something like a principal fellow. But most cases, your career is going to involve dealing with people and communicating ideas and solutions. And consequently, having development along those lines is going to be a reason why you would again think about higher education or getting more skills along the directions. Before we go into all programs, I just want to think about a few things. So there's an idea called a break-even point. The idea of a break-even, and this is something that I advise all students to think about. So when you decide that, hey, should I go for a program, right, and get myself trained, there's always a cost-benefit analysis that's partly qualitative and partly quantitative. The quantitative bit is going to be into an idea like a break-even point. And a break-even point is very simply this. I have a certain amount of money invested into a program. There's a sunk cost as well as some hidden costs. How much time will it make for me to actually recover the sunk cost, right? So that's idea really of a break-even point. So that's one of the good measures to think about whether there is value in going ahead with one of the further educational goals that you have. Okay. So for example, if you look at the slide and if you look at some of the examples here, this is an example with an MBA program in mind. And if you are doing an Indian MBA degree, you can expect something like a gross salary post graduation of the order of 22 lakhs per annum, right? And then if you do other things related to expected growth, your rental, your living expenses, and then talk about how much would be your takeaway, there is some money that's going to come as a takeaway. Okay, so that's one part of the equation. The second part is a cost. So normally there is 2 years of fees that is order of magnitude of about 26 lakhs at the moment. And there's also some sunk cost, which is or hidden cost, which is related to the opportunities you have missed. So the 2 years you are in the MBA program, you're not worked. So there is some opportunity cost associated with it. So putting all this together, doing a simple equation, math, right? Sunk cost divided by the savings I have, you'd come to a return of investment about a break-even point of about 10 years or 11 years. And in fact, you would see that most of the bank loans are structured around this way, a payback period of 10 years for a loan. That's normally how things are structured. Okay. So what this means is over the 10 years, you're going to be pretty much locked into giving all your savings away just to pay back the loans that you have. So you cannot change careers. If there is fluctuations or shocks in the market, you can't just leave a job, right? If you lose a job, then it will be really difficult for you to pay back the loans. You're in debt. So someone would actually come trying to chase you down to get the money from you. So it's going to be a pretty tight, intense period for the 10 years till you actually pay back the money that you actually took, a loan that you took. Now, if you're someone who has already saved that money, of course it makes sense. If you're someone who has actually reduced the cost that you would have to invest into the master's program or have got scholarship, again it makes sense to actually go for a program. So always think about what is the payback period time, think about the quantitative aspects of it, and also consequently think about what that means for you in terms of your flexibility to think about other options downstream. With that in mind, let's look at some of the more qualitative aspects and walk them through. So in this case, we are looking at MTech and PhD programs. So firstly, let's look at MTech program within India, and reason why you should be doing an MTech program. So for most jobs, so we know that I have now had like about 15 years of experience in the industry. Our friends have had like the same amount of time, and we have like interacted with maybe junior executives, senior executives of thousands or more, right? And one of the things that we have noticed is people do not really need high master's degree or a high technical skill to actually proceed or be successful in their job. Your bachelor's degree is in most cases more than enough. If you have common sense, if you're able to pick things on the job, it should be perfectly fine. You should be able to do a really good job. So why then would you go and do a master's program, right? And especially in India, if you're doing a master's program, please remember that you better have an academic goal or an inclination towards doing a professorial job. So that should be your inclination, and consequently that's the reason why you want to do a master's program. And why do you want to do a master's? Is because during the time of your master's you would focus on a certain research. You get to have expertise or publish papers related to a certain field, which makes you a great candidate for a doctoral program. So if doctoral program is going to be the direction you want to head into, doing a master's in India is a great option. It gets you the academic credentials necessary to be pursue the doctoral path in future, right? That's definitely one solid reason why you might want to pursue a master's program or MS program in India. The second reason can be that there are certain set of skills that you have not developed when you were in undergrad. Even though the undergraduate program is supposed to give you all the skills required for the job, you might find that either the technology landscape has changed, the job market has changed, or you are not really focused on your education at the time of your bachelor's degree, and consequently you really need to reskill and upskill your skills, right? So if that is a reason, that's again a very valid reason. Programs within India are structured towards the job market within India, right? So if that's the goal, if skill development and a focus on the Indian market is your goal, it makes perfect sense to do a master's program in India, or right, or go forward for a better future in the Indian market. Right? Finally, if you are thinking about public sectors and other things, I think there is a little bit of a brand equity. Some of the big public sector companies, some of the top MNCs actually come towards certain set of schools. So if brand is an issue and you think that your opportunities are restricted, at least in the beginning, right? In the beginning of your career, when you do not have much experience, then of course you might want to aim for one of those brand named schools like the IITs, the Indian Institute of Science, the NITs, and then think about how do you want to go ahead and get a degree or education from there, such that you can leverage the opportunities that are available. But these, I believe, are the top reasons why you should be thinking about a master's program within India. Why do you want to do a doctoral program, right? So if you have been following the news, IITs and Indian Institute of Sciences, for example, have become among the top schools in terms of generating quality research output. So India is no longer a place where things used to be like, hey, we are a decade or so behind in technologies. In some of the fields, India is actually leading the world, or it's among the top universities in the world actually publishing content out there, research content out there. The work that you do with IITs and many of the top IITs and IIScs are pretty much top notch. So you want to think about how do you go ahead and work with those faculty and develop those skills, right? Second thing you want to think about is, hey, the most jobs in the universities are gonna come because you have a doctoral program, right? You have a PhD degree under your belt, right? So if you're thinking of, hey, I want to be a faculty at say NITs or one of the top universities, having a degree from one of those top universities help. There's a little bit of a trouble at some of the universities which kind of prefer foreign PhDs or a PhD abroad, and it is only because the kind of research work that the universities are trying to do is still a little behind from the work that the other universities counterparts around the world are doing, and they want to catch up in that. So there may be a small difference in related to the quality of work being done between the top universities and the universities abroad. It is only because of the traditional gap that has existed, but the gap is bridging really fast. One of the things I want to call about is that if people want to like migrate to other countries, opportunities are open only for people who have had extremely good technical skills. So for example, this gradings or a rating system based on your technical or your educational skills. Countries like US, UK, US, and even I think Canada have that program where you can migrate if you have top skills, and consequently that might be one of the reasons why you want to do a PhD. Jumping into why you might want to do a PhD abroad, specifically why in US. Okay, so firstly, doing a PhD program is extremely selective. There's only a limited set of students that the professor actually looks to bring into the program, and consequently your research profile must be really good. So if you are an undergrad applying without having a good research potential or research background, it's really going to be really difficult for you to get into these doctoral programs. If you have research work, and it doesn't matter really the university you studied, if you have very good quality research work done, and if you have it under your belt, and if you have a master's degree with a specific set of research focus, then it's going to be much more easier to crack into these programs. Okay. PhD programs in US offer a separate route towards getting work visas. Right? So we will not get into the details, but it makes it a lot more easy to apply for work visas on behalf of the companies, and consequently it's easier to get into industry. Similarly, the skills that you have trained with in a PhD program in the US makes you kind of a specialist, and consequently your value in the market is way more than someone who has done an MS or an MBA, and consequently you have a lot more stability. I would make a point here that if you're going to apply for US specifically, think about the professor and the quality of research and look about a fit. Those are the parameters you need to be looking rather than just the name or the brand of the university. A lot of people just apply with the brand value. For a doctoral program, brand value makes absolutely no sense. It's the work that you do, the professor that you work with that makes a lot of value. When we talk about PhD programs, it's not just going to be PhD in US, of course. There's a lot of other countries that might slip under the radar. So people normally think about, say, can I do a PhD in Canada? Okay, that might be an option. I would say compared to US, the opportunities within Canada is significantly lower. It might make sense for a certain set of programs. For example, civil construction might make sense, but if you're in high tech, for example, it might not make sense to be in Canada for a PhD program. It really depends on the faculty and the school you're going to target, but Canada, think about it. Europe offers a lot of, I think, you can think of it as completely funded programs. And you can also think about easier ways to completion of your degree. So normally a doctoral degree in Europe, if I'm talking about Germany or if I'm thinking about Italy or Spain, it would get completed in say 3 years. Okay? So compared to say the time spent in US, which is probably 6+ years. So there's significant advantage there. That might be one of the reasons. But the job market in Europe is not that significant compared to say in say US. Alternatively, there are a bunch of opportunities. So when Vinod and I were working, we traveled to around Asian countries, specifically Singapore. We have been in Korea, and we have noticed that there is a lot of opportunities in Asian countries which people tend to miss out. So if you're thinking about opportunities in Korea, in Japan, if you're thinking about say Singapore, Australia, there's a fantastic set of opportunities. And again, there are a new set of like agreements between the government of India and, for example, with Australia that makes a lot more potential for people to actually go and work in, say, Australia compared to any other place. Okay, so think about these non-traditional places to do a PhD. Some of the work done in Japan and Korea, especially in, say, semiconductor technology, is like high-end, right? Similarly with Taiwan. Okay, you need to be thinking about how do you go work into or learn or get your doctoral program over there. But ultimately, remember that there's a lot of growth back in India, so always keep that in mind of how do I learn something and how do I leverage those capabilities back in India. Let's look at a little bit of the admissions. So normally, whether it is a MS program or a PhD program, there are a couple of things that you need to do. You always need to do a SOP. There's something called a statement of purpose. You need to provide something called a resume, and you need to provide a bunch of your like standardized scores, for example, GRE or TOEFL or it could be GMAT, for example, for MBA programs. Okay, so there are a couple of standardized things, and of course, recommendation letters. These need to be given. There is a subtle difference. For example, a resume is a set of work that you have done listed in a certain structure. We have talked a lot about resumes. The one pager, probably for academic or for a PhD program or a master's program, it even makes sense to write 2 pages. But You can maybe dig a little bit deeper into that in some of the videos that we have done. But I want to talk about statement of purpose. Statement of purpose is not just restating your resume, it is talking about your interest, for example, with your program. So we'll not get into the nuances of it, but there is a difference in what you're trying to express through each of these articles. MS program is probably easier to get in if you're not looking for financial aid or funding, right? And if you do not have good research potential or research background. PhD program, if you have great research background, and if you are not thinking of funding from your pocket, you're looking for scholarships, that's of course a perfect place to get into. Okay, so again, restating that exact thing, just MS in US, it's really difficult to get a fund in, right? You might get maybe an offer, provided your things like your GPA, your standardized scores, and your statement of purposes and letters of recommendations all are good. But getting a scholarship is going to be really difficult. It's especially in these days where the resources allocated for master's programs have come down. It's near impossible to get a scholarship. Think about it that way. You might be lucky among the few who get it, but largely it's going to be really difficult. Okay, but normally when people talk, when we Indians talk about how do we go ahead and study in US, the US costs are in dollars, right? It's pretty expensive, and we are talking about costs per year like about 60K to 80K really for both the tuition fees and the living expenses, and that's a significant amount. $60,000 or $80,000 is a significant amount for most Indians. So most Indians are looking for scholarships, and scholarships come in two flavors, or rather three flavors. They come as a research assistantship, a teaching assistantship, or fellowships. Fellowships are like not gonna something be available for master's students. It's gonna be for PhDs maybe. The RAs and TAs again are not going to be doled out to students unless professors have some connection or a network with students, right? So they understand you really well, they understand your depth, and they understand your capabilities. So it probably makes sense for people 1 year into the program to actually reach out and get some scholarships. I've seen that happen. But largely going from India to US, you are pretty much walking in with no funding. So keep that in mind when you think about how do you actually go ahead and study in US for a master's program. Okay. Also, a key thing to call out right now is this: for the work visas right now, the principal route is something called H1B. Okay, so we will not talk about what it is, but it's a lottery system. And currently, as it stands, there are about 8 lakh students applying for the lottery, and out of which 80,000 students are picked. So it's a 10% chance. It's a 10% chance of you actually getting a work visa. Okay. You do get something like an optional training period which allows you to work without the H1B for a period of time, but it eventually runs out, and I'm seeing a movement where companies require that you actually have H1B to be working in US. So there's a lot of calculations that go in. The point of this slide is that there are nuances. There are some quantitative decisions, there are some qualitative decisions related to your odds. How can you actually work? How can you actually generate the funds required for you to survive, right? Those things need to be thought about before you decide that you will actually go ahead and do a master's program in, say, US. Okay, so talking about some other countries, a master's program in, for example, Germany is free, right? I think it's a case with some other European countries, but it is definitely the case with Germany. There's some of the scholarships available, I think, like the DART program, which might be an interesting way to leverage and get into Germany. And also, once you get into Germany, for example, these technical skills become really valuable. The technology skills that are available in Germany and the kind of background you have working through your program becomes clearly something that you can leverage across the world. I've seen people who have migrated from Europe back into US and vice versa too, but it's definitely a good option. Similarly, I think I mentioned about Asian countries, specifically Korea, Japan. When Korea, I mean South Korea, of course. You don't want to be in North Korea. But if you're in Korea, if you're in Japan, or if you're in say, Singapore or Australia, again, there's a fantastic set of universities. Many of the master's programs are funded. You might want to dig into what are the scholarships available, how do you actually access it. But think about these non-traditional master's program too. The job market in some of these places, for example, for Singapore, Australia, Korea, Japan, these are all are still pretty good, especially in the high-tech industry. It really depends on the sector though. So dig a little bit into what are the options, what are the companies that are available over there, and then see how you would actually leverage your skills. If you have been following the news, you would know, for example, that India has just tried up a bunch of like let's say agreements with Singapore to bring the semiconductor technology to India, right? So Singapore does lead India at least, and maybe a large part of the world in semiconductor technology. Some of the big fabs are present in Singapore. So if semiconductor devices or technology is an interest, clearly a country like Singapore makes a lot of sense. Okay. One of the key things to notice, your MS does not limit your future potential. So if you have like ultimate goal to actually say, come back to India, or if you're thinking about say, hey, how do I go get further studies in a different country, let's say US or let's say Europe, you can still do that. A master's program in one of these countries, like the countries we mentioned, is a great opportunity for you to leverage it for a further PhD degree. It's highly valued, you get the right research experience, and it will be really beneficial for you. Looking at MBA programs, unfortunately, I think quite a few students think MBA is something that they should do soon after a bachelor's degree. It might be because there aren't enough jobs, and consequently people think that once you get into MBA degree, like an IIM, you would have access to the labor market in the top managerial labor markets, and life is all set. But that's really a bad way to, in my opinion, it's a really bad way to do MBA. And if you look at MBA requirements, for example, in US, it states clearly that you need to have at least 4 years of experience before you can actually start applying for the program, right? So more experience you have, it's better for you to actually be a valuable addition to the job industry. So when I went to do my MBA, for example, I realized quickly that you cannot really clear any of those interviews unless you are able to talk about your experiences, right, in the industry. So since I had experiences, I could talk. Some of my friends, they had good experiences, they could talk. So you need to have significant experience. Otherwise, your degree is pretty much meaningless. You'll be left without a job. Okay, we did the break-even point earlier. We can do that similar calculation, but remember the costs are no longer in rupees or lakhs, right? It's going to be in like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So typically, a US MBA is complete between $150,000 to $250,000. It's a wide range, and it's a lot of money, right? So you can consequently think about what a break-even would be, and if you do not have the option to work in US, what that means. MBA program always allows for only 1 year of unsponsored, it's called optional training period, OPT, and companies do not value 1 year because that's a high risk that you will not get that H-1B work visa when the lottery actually is asked. So it's a 10% chance lottery may not work out. 1 year is too small for them, small period of time for most companies to invest to. So unless you work this out really well, it can turn out to be a disaster where you don't have a job in US. You have big loans, you don't have a job, you have to come back in India and look for jobs. So you'll have to start paying US debt with Indian salaries. That's going to be really, really difficult. So think of those when you make your decision. And remember that MBA makes sense in a boom time where the market is really doing well, companies are trying to absorb, or in fact, most degrees are good in a boom time. In a recession where jobs are limited, or where the market is, the industry is shrinking, or the sector is shrinking, it may not really be the right time to do it. Okay, MBA in other countries. Now, there's going to be, like in Europe, it's going to be language problem. It's going to be limited set of jobs. Europe is not really a powerhouse in terms of like managerial jobs. There are tech jobs, but they are limited for master's students. You might want to think about really, is it worth to actually go invest and spend time in any other country? Okay. If you have like fully funded scholarships, if you can make that happen, it's a different argument. And if there is specific reason that you want to be in the job market, right? Maybe there is a startup opportunity you're aware of that nobody else is aware of. If you are really specific and clear about your goals, then it might make sense to work in other countries. But really, MBA should largely be taught from Indian labor pool as well as from the US. In my opinion, it should be taught from these two countries. You can think about, in some sense, from Asia, for example, Singapore, but think about what that means in terms of, again, the break-even point, and whether really you should be doing a master's degree in Singapore, or you should be doing an MBA, for example, in Singapore. It's going to be a calculation. It's going to be related to your work experience. It's going to be related to what is the sector you're looking for. But my point is, you need to dig a little bit deeper before you make that call. Finally, I think there is that, at least of late, there's a craze for the civil services. It always used to be there, but the craze for civil services wasn't something that was so open and out there, right? Most students I talk to, like not most, a significant, let me say, put that way. So I've been now walking around country, talking to different students across the country, right, from different universities, and there is a increased focus on trying to get into civil services, right? People spend away like years at a time trying to crack through civil services and wonder what happens after if things don't work out. So let's get a little bit into it. Selectivity is really, really low. We are talking about 1 in 500 or so. So think about the odds. It's really tough. It's also a little bit of like, if there is an insider information related to the kind of preparation you need to do and kind of like like let's say the ways that you need to present yourself, that's well understood by someone already in the civil services rather than someone trying to break in outside. So that again makes the odds really difficult for you. So if your family is not, if not a civil servant, if you're not into IAS, if you're trying to break in, it's going to be really difficult. Okay. I think one of the key reasons why students want to look at it is, hey, I have a government job, I have pensions, I have like a guarantee throughout my life. And unfortunately, it leads to other things like there are other ways in which I can, this should not be the conversation, but there are people who are thinking about, other than the salary, there are other ways in which you can exploit the system, right? I really seriously ask you folks to think through, not from the principle of exploitation itself, but the idea of, hey, should I actually think about a long-term secure job, doing nothing for throughout my life, or should I be someone who actually creates value for the country, right? The country is in a huge growth phase. We'll talk about some numbers a little later. It's got fantastic opportunities, and each one of us should be thinking about how do we help the economy grow, how do we create jobs, how do we go ahead and provide value to the people, rather than thinking about how do we take value, how do we like hide something away, right? Pretty much in that way, right? If you are someone who's passionate about like trying to help people through government services, and if you are ready to take that kind of odds, then yeah, it might make sense. But for most people, they really need to revisit on why they would want to do a UPSC or a civil service jobs versus spending that same amount of time into a skill development activity like a PhD or a master's, right? Or thinking about spending time into doing something like creating opportunities for others through an entrepreneurship. So with that, we end today's notes. Thank you all. Again, hope this was informative, and good luck.